My name's Ollie Pendered. I'm the Chief Exec of Community Energy South. I'm also a Director of Community Energy England and have the honour of attending Community Energy England board meeting and supporting the community energy sector. I see Tony, you've joined. Would you mind unmuting? Thank you. I also chair a regional support group infrastructure panel for energy in the Greater Brighton region, and was one of the founding directors of Riding Sunbeams, which is an initiative working with the railways. You'll see up on the screen here a picture of award winners from Community Energy England Award last year, it just shows the diversity and the reach that we get into communities across the country. So a little bit about Community Energy South. We were established in 2013 following the Community Energy Peer Mentoring Programme, which was run by BEIS and the Cabinet Office. And we helped mentor and help set up together with 12 other groups. And during that process, the groups asked or suggested that we set up an umbrella group for the Southeast, which has become a voice for the region, working with Community Energy England. And also our mission has really been to support community energy sector and develop partnerships. And I'll cover a little bit of that in the next 10 minutes. So this is 2018 and 2019, what the community energy sector looks like in the southeast of England. And it just gives you a feel of the reach. And we spend a lot of time looking at maps and communities and seeing who's who. So the green dots are community energy groups. The red dots are energy champions that are out in the community advising vulnerable people, normally through the big energy saving network and giving energy advice. And the purple dots are a program that we've been running called Faith and Power that I know a number of groups in London also run. And that's just been a fascinating journey, just supporting other hard to reach groups. Something that's really inspired us is the school projects, and I'm just going to dwell on this very quickly. This map, we did some work with Community Energy South and 12 community energy groups in the southeast, looking at community energy school projects, solar projects, and this was up to the end of last year, so it didn't take us up to the end of the feed-in tariff. So it covered 84 schools, over 4 megawatts and 60,000 kids that are supported by community energy. And you can see this report on our website. I'd love to see this covered for the whole of the country. We must cover an awful lot of schools and solar, and educating the next generation is really important to all of us. But this gives us a lot of faith. We know how different school projects are, or difficult they are, from leases to licenses to all the engagement and the work that community energy groups put in. And it just goes to show that we can scale up over time. This is over a 7-year period, and it gives us a lot of faith in new markets. So partnerships for the sector across the region. I'm just going to cover local industrial strategy and regional energy hubs and what that means for community energy. A little bit on the decarbonisation of transport, decarbonisation of the water sector, working with our electricity network operators and DSOs, and a little bit about local authorities. So as you all may know, or some of you may not, the country is now supported by 5 regional energy hubs. So where I'm speaking from, I'm in the Greater South East Energy Hub, and the hubs are supported themselves by the local enterprise partnerships, of which there are 38 in the country. Now, energy strategies were developed last year in all of those LEPs, supported by Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy. And those action plans, energy plans, will now form part of the local industrial strategy plans. And from the discussions that we're having within the region, in supporting the economy to get up and running after the coronavirus, these local industrial strategy funds will be really important. And I urge the community energy sector to keep an eye out for that and how your projects can be named in those strategies and engage with the energy hubs. Recently, the Department for Transport issued the Decarbonisation Transport Strategy, and I'm very proud to say that riding sunbeams and the community energy sector were listed in that strategy from the Department for Transport. And for those of you who know about riding sunbeams, there's a lot of work from Community Energy South and our partner Possible, formerly 1010, in establishing riding sunbeams and support for decarbonising the railways through the energy hubs, and working with Network Rail, so in all the LEPs. So one stream of work that Community Energy South have been looking at, sort of growing support for community energy across the sector, has been working with the water companies in the southeast of England. Now, the water companies are a regulated business. Ofwat has just taken them through their recent price period called PR19, and the outcome of PR19 was that water companies now have targets to transition to renewable energy. And at Community Energy South, we feel that this is a good link for community energy, and we should be engaging with water companies, not least because they are regulated to care for the environment, keep the water flowing, and connect with every household and support vulnerable customers. And there really is an overlap with the community energy sector, and we can help on that journey, particularly towards social impact. And then, of course, there's our network distribution, district network operators on their way to becoming DSOs. And I'm sure across the country, I don't need to tell you, but it's really important to engage with them. We have a strategy towards what we call smart communities. So linking up with UK Power Networks, who we see a very important partner in the Southeast, particularly around energy awareness, renewables and innovation, and of course, education. And that's a partnership that works really well for us and the sector going forward with innovation and smart networks. Okay, so local authorities. With our roots within Community Energy South for mentoring groups, this year, over the last 6 months, we've established a pathway to community energy. So we linked up with Essex County Council, who have spent a lot of time successfully being awarded the last of the EU funding and ERDF funding, and looking at citizen projects in energy. And as a council, they have a climate emergency target and are taking climate emergency very seriously. So we've been looking at mapping in Essex, where historically there are very few community energy groups, and this has been a really successful project. And we've managed to map groups and start networking those interested in in creating their own energy within their communities. And I'm excited to say that we'll soon be starting a similar program across the South Downs National Park, and having those discussions in Hampshire with Hampshire County Council as well, who see the value of engaging with their communities and climate emergency plans. So a little bit about our sponsors today, and then I will pass you on to Emma, who's going to give us the vision of Community Energy England. So our main sponsor today is Co-op Community Energy. Mid-Counties Cooperative and Octopus Energy signed a strategic energy partnership in August 2019, which saw Octopus take ownership and responsibility for the management and supply of energy for 300,000 customers formerly supplied by Co-op Community Energy, Co-op Energy, Flow and GB Energy. Part of this strategic partnership included the creation of Co-op Community Energy, a joint venture between Mid-Counties Cooperative and Octopus Energy. Co-op Community Energy aims to provide vital support for community generation across Great Britain, drive investments in local communities and pay generators a fair price for the power they produce. And I welcome Tom Hoines in the second session after our tea break for the Managing Director of Co-op Energy, Community Energy, who will be chairing the second session. We're also sponsored by Ricardo, who's been instrumental, as you will know, supports the CARES programme in Scotland and also works with the Energy Saving Trust in the Welsh Assembly in Wales with community energy. Ricardo is a renewable energy development company that looks to support communities and community energy across the UK. And in the Southeast, we've been working with them on a number of rural community energy fund projects and other development projects. And finally, I'd just like to say, remind you about Community Energy England. And if you're not signed up, to sign up to their newsletter, and the importance of them lobbying the UK. So without further ado, I just remind you of a quote from the Dalai Lama: "If you think you are too small to make a difference, try sleeping with a mosquito." And we're all joining up. It's very exciting today. I wish you a good day, and keep the questions going. And without further ado, I'll pass over to Emma.
Thanks very much, Ollie. Let me just share my screen.
Thanks, Emma.
Great, thanks. So, hello everyone, welcome. I'd like to start by echoing Ollie's thanks for participating in our conference today. We thought very long and hard about whether to cancel it in light of COVID-19 and the many pressures that everyone is facing right now. But after speaking to many of you, we came to the conclusion that it's more important than ever to stay in touch, albeit virtually, to share our learning and experiences and to look to the future. I hope that you all managed to take away something new today, whether it's a new business model, funding opportunity, contact, reassurance that you're not alone, or if you're new to community energy, inspiration and motivation to get involved. And just a reminder for those of you that have come on late, if you can stop your video just to help those who might be struggling slightly with their bandwidth, that'd be really helpful. Thank you. So just building upon what Ollie was saying about Community Energy England, for those of you that haven't come across us before, we were formed coming up for 6 years ago now, by a large group of practitioners, essentially to provide a strong unified voice for community organisations developing energy projects. So we do this by working with our members to advocate for community energy, working with government and regulators to create a case for more supportive policy and regulation, and also communicating what the sector is doing and the value it brings. We also support collaboration between community organisations, but also importantly for the growth of the sector with other partners across public and private spheres. We connect our members to events such as today's, and we work closely with a range of networks and associations such as the ones that you can see on this slide. We also help to build the capacity of the sector by gathering and sharing good practice, threats and opportunities, using the data we receive, such as through the annual State of the Sector survey, to identify sector needs, and working with funders and regional bodies to develop support programmes, online resources and supporting skills sharing. But we wouldn't be able to do any of this without the support and the input of our members, and you can see the spread of our membership in the map on this slide. So as there are a few people today who are new to community energy, I thought it'd be useful to start with what we mean when we talk about community energy. Community energy brings people together to take democratic climate action by understanding, generating, owning, using and saving energy. So this could be a cooperative or a community benefit society putting solar panels on a school to reduce the school's energy bills, whilst also providing educational materials and energy efficient light bulbs. It could be a society providing energy efficiency and fuel poverty advice, a community interest company developing community-owned electric vehicle charging points that also raises money for a community car club in a village that has little access to the services it needs, or a group coming together to purchase a solar farm, bringing it into community ownership, thereby creating a community benefit fund to help local environmental and social projects. The photos on this slide show the other types of community energy, such as hydro, wind, heat, storage batteries, and retrofitting energy measures. Community energy can also be done in partnership with private and public sector bodies, such as local authorities, and as Ollie was talking about, water industry. And actually, this collaboration can bring a lot of added value to both parties as well as to the local area. At its essence, community energy puts people at the heart of the energy system. Over the past couple of years, we've been involved in an increasing number of conversations with our members about their vision for the future of the movement, discussions about how we scale and increase our impact whilst continuing to remain true to the ethos of community energy. And as a result, actually debates about what that ethos is. So in June last year, as part of Community Energy Fortnight, we started a number of consultations to develop a vision for community energy in 2030. So first, we actually looked at how people saw community energy now. There was an obvious consensus that community energy is so much more than energy generation. It's a social issue that requires a just transition, and community energy is a crucial vehicle for this. Interestingly, rather than a focus on just community ownership, more emphasis was now being placed on community leadership and democratic control. Community energy organisations also generally favoured local accountability over member accountability, although this obviously depends on the type of organisation and may actually reflect the inability for new groups to register as a cooperative. Community benefit was identified as a core value, not just in terms of community benefit funds, but using community energy as a vehicle to transform local places and people. And it was felt that community energy provides clear accountability and participatory governance within the energy system, which is empowering, transparent, and equitable. The importance of overcoming financial barriers to supporting community energy was also raised as part of this, so ensuring that community energy benefits not only those who can invest. Community energy aims to accelerate the transition to a zero carbon energy system while increasing community resilience to climate change. It was clear from the responses received that community energy organisations are already at the forefront of energy system innovation. They've initiated behaviour change, accelerated the decentralisation of the energy system, reduced carbon emissions and upskilled communities across the UK. And community energy does all of this by building the consent, trust and active participation needed to ensure a rapid and just energy transition. So we then look to where the sector sees itself, where it wants to be in 10 years' time. So this next slide is a sneak preview of some of the detail of the vision, which we'll be launching in the summer during this year's Community Energy Fortnight. So Community Energy's vision for 2030, and this is a vision for the sector, not just for Community Energy England, is an energy system that is democratic, decentralised and decarbonised, and where people are truly at the heart of the transition. So by 2030, community energy will achieve a whole systems approach. So we'll continue to generate energy and improve efficiency for communities, whilst also selling electricity to local and national markets, trading on digital platforms, providing demand-side flexibility on a more regular basis, accelerating low-carbon transport, and developing collective heat projects for communities nationwide. We'll ensure that the energy transition is fair and democratic, increasing engagement with civil society to further our social impact. And we want every parish, town and city across the nation to be able to engage in community energy and for us to be representative of the communities that we serve. We'll weave into the fabric of local planning, policies and climate emergency strategies, always remaining transparent and accountable. We'll continue to lead innovations in the energy system, but making them available to people and communities nationwide and driving behaviour change using the new technologies of the energy system. Community energy will be upskilling communities, creating jobs and delivering positive social impact to ensure that no one is left behind and that everyone can benefit from the energy system. In June, we'll be releasing further details on the vision and how a range of stakeholders can support the transition. We'll also be releasing infographics, text, and other things that you can share on social media and on your websites. The vision isn't intended to be prescriptive, but is to articulate the ambition of our sector. And community energy has a huge potential to contribute to the energy system and to reach mass scale. And it's not just community energy practitioners saying this. A range of organisations are recognising the value and potential of community energy, with distribution network operators producing community energy strategies, a wide range of research by universities, and most recently, SP Energy Networks and WPI Economics producing a report on the future of community energy, which reported that, given the appropriate policy and financial support, the sector could become between 12 and 20 times larger than today by 2030. So community energy could contribute over 5,000 megawatts, power 2.2 million homes, cut energy bills of households involved by up to £150 million per year, save 1.8 million tonnes of CO2 emissions, create over 8,000 jobs, and add over £1.8 billion to the economy. To do this, community energy will be collaborative, interconnected, and intersectional, not only leading innovation, but also creating a legacy. So coming back to the here and now, there are obviously serious immediate issues to address. The coronavirus pandemic is not only having severe physical health impacts and a devastating loss of life, it's also impacting whole ways of life, destroying livelihoods, increasing loneliness, and a whole host of other effects. Many community energy groups have reacted quickly, identifying ways that they can support their communities. We'll hear from Jake next about the fantastic support that some of their projects has provided. And I'm receiving updates from members across the country about them setting up advice lines, not just to tackle energy bills, but wider issues too, supporting local causes through their community benefit funds, pausing energy bill payments for community buildings that are struggling to get by at the moment, and working with community enterprises from other sectors to help them become more robust and able to adapt to local need. There's some really fantastic examples being displayed of a flexible, responsive sector that cares. As well as dealing with the immediate threat though, we need to have one eye on the future, that the learning from the pandemic response isn't lost, and the positive examples from community-led action and collaboration are used to ensure that we build back better. We need to make sure that any post-pandemic recovery package ensures a just recovery and maintains a green transition. Communities will be key to making that happen, and we are working with a range of organisations to ensure a robust case is given to government. Of course, community energy must be part of a just recovery. This is because it can help to create system change and create a legacy by harnessing local passionate people, knowledge and capital to do energy projects, reduce carbon emissions and energy costs, provide business models and resilience for other types of community enterprises, and help connect with the community over climate emergencies, get publicity and consent for energy interventions. It is actually relatively easy to understand and therefore can inspire people to take wider action and behaviour change, as well as it being a trusted intermediary and having a broad range of networks. So I hope this has given you a flavour of some of the ambition and passion that there is for community energy and has adequately set the scene for the rest of today. As ever, we're keen to hear what you think. and whether we're focusing on the right areas, whether there's wider work that we should be plugging into. And so I think I'll stop here actually, just to make sure that we have time for discussion in the Q&A sessions, and also to make sure that we do have time to rest and recovery between each of the sessions today. And of course, me and my team will be very happy to discuss any of these issues outside the conference and to keep the conversation going. But before I hand back to the chair, as Ollie mentioned earlier, I'd like us to take just a moment to reflect and to think about those we have lost in the sector due to coronavirus and those that have been affected. So please, everyone, join me in a 1-minute silence.
Emma, thank you very much. It's always a powerful moment when you hear the silence and we can contemplate on what's been happening over the last few months. So thank you very much. So while I introduce our next speaker, Jake Burnyeat from Communities for Renewables, and while you get yourself ready, Jake was, a couple of years ago, the Community Energy Practitioner of the Year. A lot of us know him, and inspired by his projects. In the southeast, we've got Ferry Farm, and which has recently gone into full community ownership. We take a lot from what you're doing, Jake, and it's really good. And thank you very much for joining us in this first session. Just while you get yourself settled, Emma talked about the vision for 2030. Considering, you know, the sector could be 12 to 20 times larger than they are today. And just think about that with some of the groups, you know, like BESCO, Brighton Energy Co-op in the southeast, Vesco. Just think about what that's going to look like for a lot of groups over the next 10 years. And on my phone round during the week, speaking to all the 25 speakers, also how groups like Celsi are adapting to the coronavirus, and Celsi have set up a Zoom project linking in with local communities, supporting them on vulnerability. NADA Community Energy had started a food service. So, and I know they're all in touch with Jake. So, Jake, I'll hand over to you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ollie. Morning, everyone. It's interesting how this has shrunk the world a bit, and we're all calling in from all over the country. I've had contacts in the last week from Israel and Bogota about community energy, so there is upsides to all this. So I've been asked to talk about some examples of how community energy enterprises are supporting those in their communities that are facing hardship due to the coronavirus outbreak and the lockdown. On the CEE site, there is a whole page of links to COVID-19 related advice and how the sector is responding. But I'm going to talk about 3 community solar enterprises that CFR helped to set up in 2016. And those are Burnham and Western Energy, CIC, which owns a 9 megawatt community solar farm serving Burnham-on-Sea and Weston-super-Mare in Somerset. Ferry Farm Community Solar, which owns a 5 megawatt community solar farm serving the parishes of Selsey and Siddlesham down on Selsey Bill in West Sussex. And Gorcott Solar, which owns a 4 megawatt solar farm serving Buckingham, the village of Gorcott and the surrounding communities. Between them, these 3 community energy enterprises have been generating about £120,000 a year of surplus income to support energy and fuel poverty advice work in their communities and to provide funding for local community organisations and projects. And behind the scenes, 3 years of work has gone into sorting their long-term finance structures and getting their operations and governance running smoothly. And it was only really in 2019 that the organisations were in a position where they could start thinking about scaling up their activities beyond their anchor asset solar farm and looking at ways to grow their enterprise and its role in the locality's net zero transition. And some really interesting development plans were coming together, and then the corona pandemic hit. And the plans we were working on involved employing people, engaging people, deploying business models that involved people, supporting local climate action networks of people. In fact, a lot of people coming together to do stuff, and that's all near impossible for the moment. So those development plans have been put on ice. But what the three enterprises could do was deploy money, and independently, all three enterprises decided that the most useful thing they could do for the moment was to support their community's response to the net zero transition. And in the first week of the lockdown, between them, they allocated £100,000 to local corona crisis funds. So in Ferry Farm in West Sussex, they allocated £40,000 to a corona crisis fund. And that was split between £6,000 went to Selsey Community Forum that was running the local COVID mutual aid network. And the bulk of that is a cash fund to help households in crisis get through, you know, the gap between their income running out and whatever funding comes in from the government to close the gap. £10,000 went to the food bank. £1,500 went to Selsey Academy to pay for an online reading platform, and £8,000 went to pay for 40 laptops to be distributed amongst 4 schools in the area for children at home that don't have access to their own computer. Gorcott Solar near Buckingham allocated a £14,000 fund. £2,500 of that went to the food bank. Some money went to Buckingham Winslow Young Carers Network for children that look after relatives at home. And £5,500 was distributed between 3 schools to help with home learning resources, materials for kids that don't have pens and paper and things at home, and home learning platforms. And the Energy Advice Programme run by National Energy Foundation that Gorcott Solar supports has turned its hand to helping households get through difficulty, including providing prepay vouchers for people that run out of money to pay their energy bills. Burnham Western Energy have allocated a £40,000 fund, and that's probably going to go between the food banks, various corona-related recovery projects, and the Somerset Corona Crisis Fund. And Wiltshire Wildlife Community Energy have allocated £4,000 to a corona relief fund. Apologies, everyone. I thought I'd shared a screen there, but I don't think I did. So hopefully next year, these 3 enterprises will return to their longer-term purpose of supporting their community's net zero transition and tackling fuel poverty. But these rapidly deployed corona crisis funds are a good illustration of the value of communities having their own local energy enterprises, generating funds to deploy as needs arise. And in future, it might be a climate-related need which comes out of the blue. Other community energy enterprises are, I've finished my slides now, so that all they were pictures of the solar farm, so you haven't really missed out. Other communities are mobilising similar crisis funds and other ways of supporting people in need. And if every town had a profitable community energy enterprise, that story could be replicated across the UK. And that's something to bear in mind as we plan our net zero future. So let's do our bit and push for the post-corona rebuild to be a Green New Deal. And let's make the case for community energy to be at the heart of it, not a peripheral nice story. So that the net zero transition is a positive and social and economic transition, not just a technology one. And today's a good day to get some ambitious plans moving, particularly on the policy front. And I'd like to table 3 big opportunities to explore later in the day. First, putting community energy at the heart of local authority net zero transition plans, including in planning policy, setting targets for community and local ownership and minimum community ownership requirements of new energy developments, procurement, creating frameworks for the public sector to achieve some of their carbon reduction targets through buying power from local community owned renewables, which could provide the equivalent of a community feed-in tariff, and investment, using public sector finance and pension divestment to create local or regional net zero transition funds for which community energy would be eligible for. Secondly, putting community energy at the heart of the grid transition. There's some really interesting community energy based smart grid projects which are great, and they are a key part of the future. However, we also need more wires, and the current grid investment plans are too slow and are not creating the level of capacity needed for net zero. So one option we could explore is for local government, councils or the local enterprise partnerships to fund the capacity upgrades needed ahead of need, and then sell the capacity on to new generation. And if the public sector is funding the upgrades, the new capacity should deliver a public good, and community energy could be given first refusal for a significant share of that new capacity. Thirdly, there's a new 2021 Contracts for Difference out for consultation at the moment, which reinstates a subsidy for onshore wind and solar of over 5 megawatts capacity. The consultation includes a section on how community engagement and benefit should be a factor in CFD allocations. Let's lobby for requirements for at least part community ownership. So new projects getting a CFD will only get the CFD if they are part community owned. And that CFD consultation is fairly woolly at the moment, so let's push for something more concrete. So let's think big about what community energy could be, and I look forward to the rest of the day.
Jake, thank you very much. It's really good to hear what you're doing and supporting fuel poverty and what's happening at the moment with coronavirus. I just reiterate your point about the local industrial strategies and network reinforcements. You know, these consortiums looking at working with the DNOs and the network distribution operators could be really a super sort of connection for community energy going forward and for the regions. And please share on your sides the consultation for the CFD applications. I think that's really important that the sector supports that. So also, I feel for Jake because I did a practice run during the week and my presentation didn't share screen, and well done for working through that. Thank you very much. So we've now got up until 1:10 for, 11:25 for our team. Sorry, let me regroup. We've now got a Q&A session up to our tea break, which goes up to 11:10. So we've got a good 20 minutes to discuss some questions. I believe there is somebody in the background collating questions that have been coming forward.
Ollie, I've PM'd you a couple of questions I saw, but in particular there was a question from Nigel at Norwich Community Solar, so he might want to unmute himself and ask his question. And then I suggest if people have replies, they just raise their, make a note in the chat box, and then Ollie can ask them to reply.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's Nigel here from Norwich Community Solar. Listening to the presentations so far, one of the things that we have the greatest problem with is motivating our local authorities across Norfolk to wake up, basically, and stop sleepwalking into the climate crisis despite all their warm words. I've written to a local authority here in Norwich City, the county council and various district councils that have gone as far as declaring climate emergencies, only to get nothing in response. So we've thrown our hands up in the air with despair at times to think, well, how do we get these people to engage with us within a year or so, let alone, you know, the plans that they make, which could be saying that we should engage with community energy by 2025 or something like this. It's just ridiculously slow. So I'm really keen to know whether it would be possible to influence the pace of change here by getting some of their colleagues, even say in the southwest, to say, look, community energy is really great and we're working with it and it's making a difference. Because I don't think they're going to listen to us. They don't listen to their own community. That's the problem. So any suggestions, welcome. And I don't want to take up a lot of time, and happy for people to email me if they've got some good ideas. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Nigel. Yeah, I feel your pain. Look, I think that you need, I'm sure you are already, but working with your energy hub and your representative within the energy hub, in the Greater South East Energy Hub, will help that. And also you've got people like Paul Bourgeois and the universities. But if we can share you examples from around the country where local authorities are engaging with community energy, that may well help you to feedback. Emma, Jake, have you got any comments?
Yeah, I'd like to add that many local authorities at the moment are going through a climate emergency call for evidence or some form of consultation process, and they really need us to submit to those processes. Otherwise, our voice won't be heard. And I've noted with Cornwall Council that you can have a whole conversation about community energy and they're very supportive, but unless it goes through the formal process, it won't end up in policy. We did helped pull together a submission to Devon Council's climate emergency call for evidence that sets out a case for community energy across a number of policy areas, and I'd be happy to share that with Emma, and that to be turned into, or that to be part of what could be turned into a kind of generic template for responding to those sorts of consultations across the country.
Yeah, thanks, Jake. That'd be really helpful. I worked for local authorities for about 12 years, and it still amazes me sometimes kind of the level of bureaucracy that's involved, but also the amount that local authority officers have to deal with. The climate change groups and teams that I used to work with and be part of just don't exist anymore. So I think a lot of it comes down to someone who's very enthusiastic within that local authority to pick that up and drive that mantle. But I think it's probably a case of providing those examples of those that are doing good stuff, because there are some really forward-thinking local authorities out there and how we support those others. So I think there'll be discussions around this in breakout session 3 in room 2, but it's also something that CE could very happily set up a working group around, and also a discussion on our commute practitioner forum as well. We've also got some resources on our website as well, looking at the sorts of things that local authorities and community energy groups are working on around this.
Thank you. That's really positive and supportive, and I hope that if it's shared around nationally through the CE network, that would be fantastic for all those similar to the Norwich position. So great, thanks a lot.
Great, thanks for your question, Nigel, and to Emma and Jake. I just see on the discussion on the right, there's been lots of messages about the CFD consultation. It's good to see that Duncan Law has picked that up and also shared the consultation link in the messages along the side. If you don't know, Duncan is the policy lead for Community Energy England. He does a lot in Parliament, and if you do have policy ideas or questions, please get in contact with him via Community Energy England. He's a force to be reckoned with, and it's great we've got him on our side. Now, I'm going to ask a question of Sydney Charles. Sydney, would you mind coming online and asking your question about North London and Haringey?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Hi. Yeah, we've been responding to the Haringey plan in response to their climate emergency. But they seem to be claiming that Haringey electricity has to be decarbonised. but they've got no actions towards that. And no, we've suggested several times they work with UKPN. So I'm very keen on hearing all the talk of working with DSOs, especially that idea of pre-funding microgrids, or maybe that could explain more. So how do we actually get that to happen?
Thanks, Sydney. If you just go on to mute. Well, I'll start with that because we link up with UK Power Networks a lot. Somebody on, Emma Kemp is on this chat. So I'll ask Emma to send you a personal message. Emma Kemp is the Community Energy Lead for UK Power Networks and can help link you up to the right department. And see if she can help you in Haringey or speak to the right person in the council as far as UKPN supporting the council. So that's a good place to start. So I think Emma Kemp will message you directly, Sydney. Jake or Emma, do you have any other insights into DNOs across the country that you would like to share?
In terms of working with local authorities or the varying approaches to community energy?
I think just your insights into the varying approach to community energy.
So the approach does vary according to the DNO, sorry, the distribution network operator. But I think I have seen over the past couple of years definitely increasing recognition of the importance and value of community energy. I think the difficulties around the narrative. So it's the same as when we're having discussions with BEIS, the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy. A lot of it is about the size. So kind of megawatts, around 250 megawatts isn't really that much in the broader picture. So it's really demonstrating the additional value it can bring, such as stuff Community Energy South is doing around engaging vulnerable consumers, fuel poverty, and kind of that broader stuff as well. I think most now have produced a community energy strategy. We're working with the Energy Networks Association to set up community energy forums across the country so that we can share that learning across the nation. So for those of you that don't know, Energy Networks Association is essentially CEE, but for the DNOs, so kind of their representative body. So unfortunately, that's obviously been put on hold because it was supposed to take place in March, but due to social distancing couldn't, but we're definitely working on that at the moment. And yeah, and 4 out of the 6 DNOs are members of Community Energy England as well, which when we were first set up, we couldn't imagine happening. So there's obviously a trend going in the right way. It's just how we coordinate that better and make sure that it's not just 1 or 2 teams within the DNO that are really plugged in and actually the value spread across the whole organisation.
Yeah, good point. Thanks very much. Jake, I just see there's a message from Janet Hunter asks, how are we going to build on the effects of the coronavirus lockdown in reducing our energy usage going forward? That's quite a big question, but how, how could you see past the coronavirus and what the opportunities for the community energy sector are? Janet, if you like, you can come online and just clarify your question and add to that while Jake thinks about it.
Still on mute, so shall I try and respond?
Yeah, go ahead.
Can we see past the corona crisis? I couldn't a month ago. It feels more appropriate to start thinking past it now. I think for community business models, and one thing the corona crisis has demonstrated is how quickly amazing community action networks can mobilize, given the challenge. And therefore the role of community enterprises generically in resilient communities. The other thing it's highlighted to me is how quickly the population will respond to a crisis and to science when it's led from the top down. I think it's quite difficult to go back from this position to one where the government isn't taking a lead on climate change science, or I hope it's difficult. And if it isn't difficult for the government, we should make it difficult for the government, going back to that. In terms of the community energy's reaction to the COVID crisis and how quickly they've turned their hand to supporting communities, whilst for many of us on the inside that might see as a kind of diversion from the core long-term objectives, I think it has highlighted to people that perhaps don't get community energy, as I said before, the benefit of it, and the benefit of communities having their own profitable enterprises that can turn their hands to whatever challenges the community faces. So hopefully, altogether, it helps add to the case for community energy being part of a just transition in the long run.
Thanks. Emma, have you got anything to add?
Sorry, I got distracted by looking at the Q&A chat down the side. So is this related to coronavirus?
Yeah, it is, yeah. While you gather your thoughts, I'll just mention something that one of my observations. So I chair a regional support group in the Greater Brighton City region with chief execs from the region, and I had an insight into how the local authorities and the government in the region, the governing body with the local enterprise partnership, is preparing sort of 3 steps with what's happening with the coronavirus. So there's obviously the immediate issue with business support, and actually in the Greater Brighton City region, we have an airport, obviously in Gatwick Airport, and also the coastal towns rely a lot on tourism and restaurants and the tourism industry. So it was very hard hit. So the immediate issues of business support, and I think there's a place there for community energy supporting residents locally and also the businesses. And then the second point is when the economy starts up, sort of what's the practicalities of restarting an economy when it gets up and running again. And I think it's unique to the community and sector that we're very innovative and support our communities just by who we all are. And the third point was that government will inject into local economies. And that's my point, and I think Jake made it through the local industrial strategy and invest in local infrastructure. And there's a really big place for collaborating with energy projects across a region, and there's a place for community energy there.
Yeah, so little bits to add. So in terms of gathering the evidence out there, just a plea that if anyone does know of any of the case studies, do please share them with us, as we are doing. I think what's really key at the moment is gathering that evidence of how, as a sector, we are responding and being flexible. Absolutely agree with Jake that it's not a distraction from what community energy groups do, because when we look at the state sector response, most of people are motivated by that climate resilience, community resilience. So it's not just about the energy side, it is about that supporting communities. And it's going to be really important for us to gather that evidence and share it. So at the moment, we're sharing that with government, but also with media and with funders as well. So I've done a couple of sessions with funders over the last couple of weeks, really talking about what community energy is doing and showing that kind of the different strengths. So we have that bigger business case for that ongoing support going forward. Because I think we're not going to get that national support as much going forward. So it's really how we plug into those other support mechanisms and continue to transform places and communities through what we're doing. In terms of post-coronavirus, there's at the moment, one of the risks for me is that the green economy is being spoken about very separately from the community approach. So it's how we bring those together. So we're trying really hard to work across the energy trade associations and Charles Wood from Energy UK speaking later about how they're coordinating action around making sure that there's a green recovery, but also working with Power to Change and other organisations to really kind of look at how that community resilience, and there's, I can't remember the hashtag, but there's a hashtag out this week about really promoting social enterprises and charities' approach to this sort of thing. So it's really bringing those sides together and working together. I think there is definitely an increase in acknowledgement around the importance of that, but I think if we see the policy approach at a national level, it's going to take a lot for the understanding that we have, and maybe kind of broader politicians, how that's actually going to feed up into the cabinet. And I think we do need to really, really work together on this. And any of our members who is keen to engage and support that, please do get in touch, as we are working with a broad range of organisations on it. And I think in the chat earlier, there was a couple of things. So Arena Coalition for Action has called for green recovery based on renewables. There's been the Petersburg Climate Dialogue the last couple of days. So there's a lot of discussion there about green economy. So there is a lot of discussions happening out there. It's just quite hard to keep a handle on it all. So I think maybe that's something that CE needs to start communicating and pulling together a little bit more for people.
Thanks, Emma. Emma, I just picked up on a message on the chats, which are lots going on the right-hand side of my screen, saying, congratulating you in explaining your acronyms. So thank you very much for that and making it easy for everybody. So there was a message that I picked up from Nigel Cornwall. I just wonder, Nigel, would you like to come on and ask your question about the regions and your observations for local authorities?
Yeah, hi. I think I should be visible now. Yeah, good morning, and very well done so far. I guess I put 2 or 3 things up. I think the comment that I turned into a question is really around creating something that is a much stronger pull-through mechanism at a time when quite clearly market prices are falling in an environment where the smart export guarantee doesn't, in my opinion, work anyway. So I think there are already problems before we moved into COVID-19. I guess what I was trying to get at is, and we see this, and I echo the comments that Nigel Hargreaves from Norwich Community Solar was making earlier, and that is, there's a lot of activity, a lot of people talking about climate emergencies, but actually when it comes to it, nobody is really investing real-time effort and money in terms of local planning agencies. I know the energy hubs are beginning to have an impact, but they're spread very, very thin. They don't really have a long-term mandate as far as I can see. And personally, I've been very disappointed by what the New Anglia LEP has brought to bear here. It seems not to be interested at all in community energy. And I come back to the slide you showed right at the beginning, where there is absolutely very little happening, it would seem, in Norfolk, which from my perspective is extremely embarrassing, given a lot of the spade work we've tried to put in here to get community schemes developed. So I guess it was a statement which I turned into a question, which is, should there not be a very clear mandate placed on the energy hubs and the local enterprise partnerships to facilitate active local development of community energy schemes? So that's my question.
Emma, you put your hand up to input to this. Thanks, Nigel, by the way. We all follow Cornwall Insights, and it's great to hear from you. Emma.
I absolutely agree with Nigel. One of the things that we're starting to do actually is get more involved in kind of the national coordination side of energy hubs. We're just starting the early discussions for it now, but I think using the hubs to get into the LEPs. I do quite a lot in Sheffield around this with the local authority and our local enterprise partnership, and considering I work for the local council, we're based in Sheffield, trying to get the business, the community energy through the business voice is really difficult, and most of us don't have the time to do this. So I think getting that mandate there is definitely important. It'll be, Nigel, I suggest, and anyone else interested as well, that you get involved in the regional strategy and energy hub session later. So we've got Patrick Alcorn from BEIS, from Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy Department in Government, who's the head of local climate and energy, and also Kate Gilmartin from the North West Energy Hub as well. And for those of you that have come across Kate Gilmartin's name before, she used to be very much involved in the sector around the Microhydro Association, so really gets that community energy. So I think there'll be some really interesting discussions around that later.
Sorry, Jake, last point, you, and then I'll just close up. We've got a poll that we want to put forward before we all go off for tea, but it is tea time. Go ahead, Jake.
I was going to respond to Nigel's other point on energy prices, which I think is a very important context for the day. So those of you that don't follow electricity prices, mid last year, electricity prices were hovering around £50 per megawatt hour. And then in the autumn, they started to crash, driven by the oil market crash, and then the COVID demand reduction has added to that further. So now electricity prices are in the 20-something pounds. And the impact of that is, last year we were in a position where subsidy-free solar and wind, if you had the right scale size and a suitable grid connection, worked. Now it probably doesn't. The simple fix to that would be for the government to reintroduce some kind of feed-in tariff for community energy, or at least a minimum export rate, which disappeared with the feed-in tariff last year. The alternatives are the CFD that we've already discussed, and local authorities committing to buy power at a long-term viable price from community energy projects in their area. All three of those things can provide a minimum price guarantee, which is important to make projects viable and enable them to be financed.
Jake, thank you very much. Okay, I'm going to close this session now. There's an online poll going on, which is I'm keeping an eye on my right. If everyone has a natural break, stay online, and we'll come back in about 5 minutes for an 11:30 start. And thank you very much for all your contributions.
So Ripple is a clean energy ownership platform, and we basically want to make cooperative clean energy ownership mainstream. And we're about to launch our first wind farm in the next couple of weeks. And yesterday we announced that we're partnering with Co-op Energy, powered by Octopus Energy, for our first project, which we are really, really excited about. So yeah, we're really fantastic timing to be here today. So Ripple's mission is to make clean energy ownership affordable and accessible for everyone, everywhere. So we're starting in the UK with, as I said, our first project in the coming weeks. But basically, and we just want to roll it out project after project. Starting in the UK, we're already starting to look at other markets as well. And so I've worked in the wind sector for 20 years, and as we came to the end of subsidies, it was really clear that, you know, corporate PPAs were seen as being, for large scale projects, the new big, silver bullet, as it were. But it meant that we got to the position where if you were a big corporate, so if you were Google or Facebook, you could get a corporate PPA and access large-scale onshore wind, which is now the UK's cheapest source of power, or you could own a share in a large-scale wind farm as well. But if you're an individual, your only option for clean energy ownership was to put solar on your roof, which is really expensive. And if you have to own a house, you can't rent, you can't live in a flat, and your house has to be in a place that's going to be giving you good solar output as well. And that just seemed wrong to me, basically. So what Ripple enables people to do is to cooperatively own a tiny part of a large-scale wind farm or large-scale solar park, and have the clean energy that it produces supplied to their home. So instead of putting solar on your roof, or as well as, to complement it, you just own a tiny bit of a large-scale wind farm and get the electricity supplied to your house via the grid, essentially. So this enables everyone to be able to access what is now the UK's cheapest source of power, so large-scale wind and large-scale solar. We estimate that shared ownership of onshore wind is around or up to about 75% cheaper than rooftop solar. So for a typical household, for a large-scale project, they'd be looking at roughly around £1,300 to own enough of the wind farm to supply their 3 megawatt hours of electricity. It doesn't matter whether you rent or you live in a flat, and if you move, if you have solar panels and you move, you have to leave them behind. With Ripple, you still own a bit of a wind farm. That wind farm is still on a windy hill in Scotland. Manage the operation of the wind farm as well. We partner with suppliers, and like I said, we're partnering with Co-op Energy for this first project, and we're also partnering with other energy technology companies. So we've got a MOU with SunAmp, which is a heat battery provider, and also Eevee.energy, which is an EV charging software, which means that customers can potentially charge their EVs up when the output from the wind farm is greatest. Sorry, I've gone on here. So yeah, the benefits for people is that it just gives them a really easy way to act on climate change that they can feel great about, and they understand that it's really tangible. They can tell their mates about it, and their mates will understand they're acting on climate change. So of course they're owning a bit of a wind farm to supply their home with clean energy. It's really understandable. They can also reduce their electricity bills. Basically they pay their capex, share of the capex up front, and then they get, provided they own enough to supply their home's electricity, the electricity element, so the wholesale element of their electricity bill, then becomes just the low and stable OPEX of the wind or solar park. And then we think it can be a base for a zero carbon lifestyle. So if you switch your car to an EV, you switch your heating to an electric heating, and you power all of that with your wind farm, you could be looking at 66% CO2 savings across your whole lifestyle. So you're basically left with food and aviation after that. And it's just really, really simple, basically. So a few clicks on our website, obviously you can read those, share off a document, and there's a lot of documentation that goes with it. But you can sign up very, very quickly. And that's a big part of it is just, by making it accessible, we need to make it really easy for people to do and for them to understand what it's all about, essentially. So we see Ripple as a sort of evolution of community energy. So there's obviously still the ownership is by cooperatives. We are simply the managing agent of the co-op. So we are not we're not board members of the co-op. We have got no control over the co-op. We simply manage the co-op, and co-op members benefit essentially by coming together and being able to do things together that they can't do alone. So it's sort of more like a sort of traditional farmers co-op than a traditional energy co-op. But we want to really broaden out the appeal to people. So like younger people, who are particularly those who are more mobile, if younger people tend to rent, they are not living in their forever home, in which case solar panels may not be appropriate for them. So yeah, we want to really broaden the appeal to people who don't see themselves as sort of financial investors. They are just buying a bit of wind farm to get cheap, clean electricity, essentially. And we want to get to scale really, really quickly. So we're looking at, our first project is a single turbine, but we want to get to large scale projects as quick as we can. That means that obviously customers get cheaper electricity because the capex per person is so much cheaper, but it also means there's lower management fees as well because we've got the scale as well. And And yeah, it's about creating virtual communities. So whether you live in a tower block in Brixton or in a rural setting in the Highlands, we think everyone should be able to access their own source of clean electricity. So that's what we're doing essentially. So yeah, and our platform is really, really scalable and really flexible. So we can put any fuel-free renewable energy project on the platform. So we're looking at wind, solar and hydro initially. So if you've got a good, fully consented project that you are looking that needs a way forward, do get in touch, because if, provided it sort of meets our DD requirements, we can put a range of different projects on the platform. We've got the full legal framework to back it up, and if you have a local energy co-op and people in that local community would like to own that project and be supplied by the electricity that it generates, that's something we can potentially accommodate on the platform as well. So do please get in touch. So that's a very quick run through of Ripple. Okay, cheers.
Thank you, Sarah. Thanks very much. I think what we'll do is we'll run through with the rest of the session as planned, and hopefully we'll be able to get Dan back in at the end. If not, I think we're trying to work out if he can just audio in and we can go through his slides. So David, if you're there, if we can move on to your session.
Great. Okay, thank you. So I had a little bit of trouble trying to share my screen in the practice session, but let's just see if I can do it now. Failing that, I only have a few slides. Yeah, interestingly, I can't show my full screen, but I can show a slide sorter. Can you see that?
I can see that, David, yes.
Okay, great. So on the program, it's put down as something like the future of solar, the golden age of solar. I think it's a little bit of an exaggeration, but it does address some of the issues. Jake was talking about the wholesale price of energy coming down to 20 or 30 megawatts, but I don't see ordinary people getting access to that. Ordinary people are still paying the retail price for energy. Sarah was saying rooftop solar is really expensive, and we want to address that with this project. And other people were saying that cities and local authorities aren't doing very much. And I'm in Bristol, and the city council is going out for its first billion to start working on climate change with the City Leap project. It has a one city climate strategy to get to carbon neutral by 2030, and the community is very involved with both of these projects. So, Lockleaze loves solar. Lockleaze is a former council estate in Bristol that has significant amounts of fuel poverty and economic deprivation. And I started getting involved with solar in 2011. That disgusting looking solar array there is the first solar we put on top of a community building in Bristol. It was a good learning project. It was 40 megawatts. We did that in 2011. And then we took that straight into Lockleaze in 2012, set up Bristol Power Co-op and offered people free solar on their roofs. So this was an opportunity to engage with people. And this is the little flyer that we put out. 100 people came to meetings. We didn't have a lot of money. We ended up putting solar on 23 roofs and learning a lot. And then we thought, how are you going to expand? And we kind of didn't manage to expand that project. But what we did see was the cost of solar coming down. We saw the feed-in tariff coming down. But during that period, we saw that if you invested $1 million in rooftop PV, you got a feed-in tariff income of around 2 million. So that was all very nice. And you really weren't looking at what was happening to the retail price of energy or what you were generating. So for the money that you were investing, because the cost of solar was going down, you were getting more and more actual retail energy. by 2015, £1 million invested was generating what would be £2.8 million worth of retail energy over the life of a project, 20 years. So we really thought about that, and there was a moment, and I'm not even sure now whether it was 2017 or 16, but it was at Hacking Energy in Manchester when I saw Murray Gilly talking about energy local, and I thought, she is the chosen one. This is the route. You're going to be able to access a retail price of energy. We're going to be able to put solar on roofs and share energy. And we and this was very much sponsored by Co-op Energy. We tried to set up a project that would work with that and didn't manage to do it at the time. But eventually we heard about next generation community energy, and I had been working with Lockleaze and talking to a solar farm developer, and we decided to put in for a grant. So the idea was that you've got a regular solid solar farm developer, low carbon Gordano, who know how to deliver solar. And we thought, well, we'll just put, the only change we'll make is we'll put the solar farm on roofs. We had Lockleaze Neighbourhood Trust, which is a physical community. And the challenge was, how are we going to administer this solar on roofs? And we needed to work with, we were at the time, at the start of the project, talking to Co-op Energy. They seemed to be in transition. We ended up talking with Bristol's own energy company and ended up with the idea we're going to put smart meters in people's homes, put solar on 300 roofs, and those people are going to get cheaper energy bills buying the solar off their own roof from the array that they didn't pay for, that was put there for free. So that's a pretty simple model. And you saw earlier the brochure that we used first time round. On the left of your screen now, you've got the brochure that we're using this time round to recruit a steering group. And then of course we hit the wall with COVID, and we were just in the middle of recruiting our first 20 or 30 roofs for a quick pilot. And so we stopped and we looked around, and just before COVID kicked in, we found out, and what we were going to be doing, we were going to be selling the solar at a discount of maybe a third from retail and picking up an export PPA, and that would just cover the costs. It's tight but viable. And then we found ourselves, quite by chance, talking to a solar wholesaler, and we realized that the fundamentals of solar had shifted more than we thought, and we were going to be able to install solar for about 25% less than we got in our budget. And what that means is we are going to be able to offer the households in our project the solar electricity at kind of the same price as we're going to get for exporting it wholesale. So people, instead of a third off retail price, which was what we were planning, we're going to be able to sell people solar electricity at a third of retail price. And that's quite an exciting prospect. And it makes the project replicable and scalable. I will post the link to these slides and this little flyer, which gives some more details. If you really want to understand Lockleaze Loves Solar, we did a launch event in November, and there's a YouTube video of it. But that's the kind of overall. So COVID has given us the opportunity to go back and rethink the project even before we really started it, and to transform it quite interestingly. And we would like to see this first megawatt become the 250 megawatts that Bristol plans to put on its roofs. There, I think I'm actually about 2 minutes early. I'm going to stop sharing now, and if anybody wants to feed a question or move on to the next. Thank you.
Thanks very much, David. Yeah, you still had 2 minutes on the clock. Very impressive. I think we're going to hold the questions for the end. I've seen a few questions coming through, so they are being collated, and what I'll do is I'll read those out at the end and perhaps ask those people who have asked questions to unmute and come on and ask you directly. So I think we're going to fly through now to the next presentation. I see Dan's presentation now has come up. Dan, does that mean we have you back online?
Yeah, Tom, I'm back, yeah.
Fantastic. Okay, all right, Dan, we'll hand back over to you now then.
Okay. I'm just gonna, Tom, how far did I get, at least in public, on the presentation? Can you remember?
I think it was slide number 2. I don't think we got much past that, to be honest.
I did a really good presentation to myself then.
Right.
Sorry, I'm just trying to, how do I,
At the bottom right, there's a little projector screen picture. If you click on that, to the right of that. Bottom right near the Zoom bar, just to the left of the Zoom bar, there's a tiny projector screen picture. If you click that.
Okay. I can't see that. And the instructions at the top, the toolbar there, are kind of hidden by the Zoom icon.
Hitting F5 work?
F5, right.
Then go to the bottom right of your PowerPoint screen, and you'll see a little thing that looks like a podium. Press that. Next to the Zoom bar.
That's what I was trying to describe.
Keep going to the left. Almost, keep going. Next one. There. No, the other.
That's it?
No, to the right.
To the right. The ones that immediately to the right of what you just pressed.
Right hand corner, Dan. Go to the right hand corner of your screen with your mouse.
Bottom right.
Yeah, sorry.
Your middle at the moment. Keep going, right. That's it.
Right. Bottom right.
That's it.
No, right a bit. Right a little bit.
And again.
And again. That one.
Click. Yay.
Okay.
You're
Cool,
away.
great. Okay, so I've got a bit less than 10 minutes, I guess.
Yeah, that's fine. We're running slightly ahead, so that's fine, Dan.
Okay. Can you all see the presentation?
No, it says end of slideshow. I think you need to scroll up to the top of your presentation first.
Okay, sorry. Okay. Okay, so yeah, I'm manager of Our Lamb and Tower, which is a charity. We've set up 2 co-ops, Egni co-op, which I'm talking about today, and then Owl co-op. Owl co-op, I can sort of see our wind turbines out the window now, actually, and they're turning, so that's good news. And we're selling our power to cooperative community energy as well, so I'm sure Tom is pleased with that. One of the things and obviously the wind farm, it was a long time in development, but we sort of finally got there in January 2017. It's obviously been key to the expansion of Egni, but also grant funding was as well, and contracts that we'd secured. And those are our overall sort of drivers in taking stuff forward. That's our wind farm on the Mynydd Gwryd, about 20 miles north of Swansea. You can visit it, it's on common land. And those are our sort of awards, etc. Just to sort of say, you know, for many years we were sort of really struggling to keep going, and it's just in the last few years that we kind of got recognition and got our wind farm up, and things suddenly changed. So I know lots of projects really struggle, and we certainly did. And it's just important to kind of remember that things can and do change. We've been involved in solar for a number of years. We grant funded solar panels on the local primary school back in 2004. And at that point, it was one of the biggest installations in Wales. And through the current expansion, we've actually installed 2.4 megawatts on sort of roofs throughout Wales. And we're hoping for sort of 500 kilowatts to 1 megawatt before the September FIT extension deadline. The current model is definitely underpinned by the feed-in tariff, but on the larger roofs, that's only a proportion of the install. So we are installing quite a lot of kilowatts that are subsidy-free, and that hopefully is going to take us forward into the transition beyond feed-in tariff to obviously continue rooftop solar. And that's how it's been funded, so 1.8 million share offer at 4%, and then a £2.1 million loan from the Development Bank of Wales, which is actually backed by Welsh Government money, who are really supportive of the community energy sector. And we're, that's another option, is to refinance that loan through our share offer to make that loan then available, or that fund available for other community energy projects in Wales. But it's a particular thing for Wales, but it's very useful, very good to see that replicated in England and elsewhere. This is just a sort of slide about, it's been a big, so the main factors behind the expansion of Egni was actually new staff who were underpinned by grant funding. Two in particular, Rosie and Alex. Rosie Gillan we pinched from Jake, actually, Communities for Renewables. Both studied in Cornwall, the renewables courses there, and then are from Wales originally and moved back. But basically that they were critical in kind of expanding our work. I can't emphasize that enough, and I'd say if there are any funders on this call, really please look at that in sort of strengthening capacity within community energy organisations. In terms of the challenges we faced, procurement was one. How we managed to pre-register lots and lots of sites. How were local authorities going to select Egni to actually do those installations? I can sort of talk more about that in questions, but we did manage to find a way, particularly with Newport Council, Cardiff and Pembrokeshire Council. But it does feel that it's a real key issue for community energy projects, and what the procurement system needs to reflect and sort of accept is the added value that co-ops can bring to delivery. So it's not just on a sort of price per kilowatts installed or any other kind of random measurement that procurement looks to try and place on solar installs. It needs to look at who's providing that if co-ops are to stand more of a chance. We also had an issue around just capacity within local authorities. I think a few different speakers have spoken about that. I think the local authorities that we ended up working with, the key thing was individuals there that were keen to work with us, but they're obviously overstretched themselves, especially with all the cuts. And the other key driver was the sort of the climate change targets, which have been set by Welsh Government, which are helping to drive local authorities. Leases was a key thing as well. Luckily, we were able to negotiate those with local authorities directly, and they tended to own outright the schools. But it did take time. And obviously the FIT deadline was a sort of key driver for getting installations, and then it was just a massive shock and impact, the sort of corona outbreak. But luckily we did manage to get lots of installs done. This is some of the educational work that we're doing with schools, which is obviously a key part of the project. And this is something we're going to be developing in future. One of the interesting things we've done is donate £500 of shares to all of the schools that are taking part. This builds on something we've already done with local community organisations in our area, including sort of food hubs. But with the schools as well, we just wanted to kind of develop sort of entrepreneurship ideas and help explain the co-op business model to them, as well as the sort of climate change impacts. And that's something we're looking to try and do in the future. This is one of the educational things we've got that we'll be sharing on our website, Green Routines, which is sort of based on about a year's research of sort of people's habits in Wales, how they reduce their carbon emissions. And it's all kind of hand illustrated. It's a really nice publication. This is one of the portals that we're, just example of how schools can learn about the solar install. Obviously, there's loads of data, loads of interesting stuff that they can analyse from this Solar Edge portal, and obviously even to an individual panel level. And it would be good if sort of public access can be made more available to kind of give full access to these kind of portals from solar panel inverter companies like Solar Edge. What next? I mean, obviously until September, install as much as we possibly can, and we're kind of very busy sort of developing sites at the moment. We've also got to sort of focus on, operation and maintenance, making sure that our current installations are functioning properly, and making sure we've got our billing systems kind of set up. It's obviously a massive expansion, having sort of 70 or so sites, so solar rooftop sites now part of Egni. So we just need to make sure that that's running properly. It'll be interesting to see what the install cost ends up being now post coronavirus, because obviously China is the main producer of solar panels. What the panel costs will be. For most of our existing installs, we've got a sort of big warehouse with solar panels in them with our main installer, Joju. But going forward, we don't know what that's going to be. Obviously, PPA prices is a key issue, as Nigel Cornwall and others have highlighted, and Jake. That's certainly on new sites and on larger sites, something we're really going to have to consider with the sort of decrease in power prices. Again, council capacity is going to be an issue. Certainly at the moment, they're all focused on the outbreak. And just the availability of panels as well. Just we're not sure, if we need to order more panels, new inverters, how available that's going to be in the UK. Going forward beyond the feed-in tariff, beyond September potentially, again, it's a key issue sort of around procurement, how co-ops can be integrated within that procurement system to be properly considered. And there are various frameworks out there, but they're quite challenging for sort of new co-ops to join, and they're very much set up for sort of large companies. And I've not figured out certainly a way of using those portals in an effective way. To date, it's always been direct engagement with local authorities, and obviously then sort of looking at the business and community sites is a bit easier. Public sector capacity, and that partnership needs to be sort of based on kind of shared values. So it's good to see the strategies that are developing in England, and the role that community energy can play within that. This is our current kind of offer, a 20% reduction on electricity costs. But going forward, the key thing is that's going to need to be high on-site use, or kind of like driven by carbon reduction targets. So it's going to be difficult to install, for example, on most community buildings. Obviously really important for their community role, but in reality they don't tend to use that much electricity. So the costs, per kilowatt to install on a small community centre in Pembrokeshire on a sort of slate roof are pretty high as compared to a large factory or a large comprehensive school. So those are points. And I think, we probably need to be linking up more with other co-ops to sort of reduce costs, maybe looking at sort of buying panels in bulk, inverters in bulk. I know some co-ops are doing that, like Schools Energy Co-op, or Solar for Schools rather, and potentially working with with John Halley and Noel and others via the big solar co-op to help achieve that. So I think those are the main things I wanted to say. I'll answer any questions at the end. Diolch yn fawr. And just also to flag up, as well, that I'm part of obviously Community Energy Wales, and that's a very useful website to look at in terms of what's going on in Wales. Welsh Government's very supportive as well. And just one of the key backers of our share offer has actually been the Friends Provident Foundation. So they put 100,000 into both of our share offers. So they're well worth contacting if you've got a share offer and speaking to them. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Fantastic. Thank you for going through that quickly as well. Much appreciated. So I think now we're going to move on to Adriano. Adriano, if you're there, if you can share your screen.
Thank you, Tom. I'm here. I'm just going to show my face, and then I'm going to switch off my video because we are steam-powered, no internet here. So I'm going to say hello. switch off my video and share my screen. So my name is Adriano. I'm the Innovation Director at the Low Carbon Hub. For those who don't know the Low Carbon Hub, we are a community energy organization. We are actually two separate entities. There is the Low Carbon Hub KIC, a community interest company, and the Low Carbon Hub IPS, which is a community benefit society. The Low Carbon Hub has been going on for nearly 10 years now. We have installed a number of rooftop PV, mainly on schools and some businesses. We developed a hydro. We are based in Oxford and we operate in Oxfordshire. The Low Carbon Hub is now working on 4 different innovation projects. One is an European Regional Development Fund project, which is to catalyze wider innovation in the green sector, in low carbon energy sector. There are 2 projects which are funded by BEIS, one for both on energy efficiency for both domestic and SMEs. And the 4th project is Project Clio, which is local energy Oxfordshire, which is what I'm going to be talking about today. So I'm going to talk a bit about the objectives of Project Clio, the partners in the consortium, our approach to systemic change, and what we've done so far and the next phase of the trials. Now, this is a short presentation, and which means that I won't be able to go into too much detail, but we will be holding webinars that go into detail into specific areas, and it will be available at our website. You can look it up. It's lowcarbonhub.org. So Project Leo is a consortium of different organizations addressing all different aspects of the transition to zero carbon. It is led by SSEN, which is the DNO for most of Oxfordshire. There is us, the Low Carbon Hub, both universities in Oxford, University of Oxford and Oxford Brookes University, local authorities, the City Council and County Councils. We have a wide range of startups, energy suppliers, tech companies. So it's a very wide range of partners that we felt were required to meet the ambitions of Project Leo. So Project Leo is one of 4 smart network demonstrators funded by Innovate UK through Central Government Industrial Strategy Challenge. It is the most wide-ranging of the 4 demonstrators, as it tries to approach the systemic changes required to achieve net zero carbon. So in that sense, we see it as being technology agnostic and includes different forms of generation, storage, demand response, as well as the electrification of heat and transport. Now, a critical part of making this work is the transition from DNO, or distribution network operators, to DSOs, distribution system operators. And that's where Project Leo, which brings the real-life demonstrators, interfaces with Project Transition, which is a NIC project funded through Ofgem, again led by SSEN, and they are doing the high-level definition and specification of what a DSO looks like and its role as a neutral market facilitator. So Transition is setting out the new model of operating or of operation for distribution networks, and Leo is developing the demonstrator project for that model. So what is the role of the Low Carbon Hub? I think it's fair to say that the Low Carbon Hub played quite a major part in convening the consortium, initially working with Oxford University, and then gradually the scope and the number of partners widened to where we are now. So the Low Carbon Hub is developing the majority of the plug-in projects, which are the individual demonstrators with different technologies. But beyond technology, we are looking at what it means to have an equitable energy system, so no one is left behind. As part of it, we are looking into new business models for community energy that includes not only how to operate, but also new ways of deploying capital for community energy. We are also developing what I would refer as a utility-grade software platform. We call it the People's Power Station. Could be referred to as a virtual power plant that will enable visibility, control, and integration of distributed energy resources into fully automated market platforms. So the approach taken by Project Leo and by the consortium is one of addressing the systemic changes required for the transition to zero carbon. And to do so, we need to address different aspects of innovation that go well beyond just the technical aspects. I think it's kind of the way we are doing it. We have adopted a lean ecosystem transition process, which is proving to be very quick to adapt and incorporate the learning as we go along developing these trials. And in this point, I wanted to emphasize the value brought by the universities in providing these robust frameworks for innovation. So what does it actually mean on the ground? So we have some examples of individual pieces of innovation being developed. So I would say that individually, they might not be that new. It is the joined up approach that we are taking that we consider to be the most innovative part of Project Leo. So we have, from the development of these end-to-end automated market participation tools, we have DSO procured flexibility services such as constraint management, peak management, DSO facilitated peer-to-peer services like capacity trading and offsetting. We are developing new forms of local PPAs with a lot of emphasis in the value of locality. We are developing investment models combining community investment with institutional investors. We are linking that into a comprehensive local strategy plan. Oxfordshire has a plan to build 100,000 new homes in the next 10 years or so. And so we are linking that, the infrastructure development with the energy plan. And moving on, into the next 2 years of Leo, we will be integrating all these different cogs in the system and start bringing them all together. And the main focus for us will be the development of a set of trials that we refer to as the Smart and Fair Neighborhood Trials. So the Smart and Fair Neighborhood Trials is a demonstration of what the community energy scenario described by the future energy scenarios look like on the ground. So the National Grid and the ESO, in their work in the future energy scenarios, have shown that it is possible with a decentralized model to achieve zero carbon. So now we are trying to implement it and demonstrate how it could be done. It is now a key part of Project Leo, as it is the means by which we bring together all aspects of innovation that we are trying to address. For the low carbon hub in particular, the main focus is to ensure that whatever we do is equitable and accessible. Again, we are using a model developed by the University of Oxford, for each trial zone, and we have 8 identified trial zones in Oxfordshire, we will have an anchor load or generation, and we will create clusters of domestic and business energy users around it. And then we will be creating the technical, economical, commercial, finance, social, all these different aspects of innovation to develop these smart and fair neighborhoods. Now, the way we are going about designing these trials is, again, focusing on how we can create the environment or the ecosystem to allow this decentralized model to flourish. It is for us a way to demonstrate and to satisfy all the 3 legs of the energy trilemma: a system that is reliable, sustainable, and equitable. And again, a point about being equitable. I think this term has been hijacked or oversimplified, and is often referred to as affordability, which we believe to be very narrow. And it is more than being just affordable. It is about equity and accessibility. So 10 years ago, or around that time, people in the community around Oxford started asking the question on how to replace Didcot Power Station with a zero carbon equivalent. It was clear to the people around the table that to do so, it had to be a combination of energy efficiency and renewable generation. Now, the power station that you can see is no longer there. Didcot coal-fired power station is no longer, it's being decommissioned and demolished. So now we just need to replace it. So before Leo started, we literally went back to the drawing board. And I'm not joking, the blackboard on the screen is an actual drawing on when we were trying to identify all the different aspects of the system that we needed to be working on or with, and to meet the objective that we had set. It was not only technology, but we needed a different system or a different ecosystem altogether. Now we have that opportunity to try or to test, to adapt, to learn, and create a virtuous cycle of change. And again, with people and communities at the heart of it. It is very exciting for us and quite a unique opportunity for community energy as a whole to be part of this project. We've been discussing it amongst ourselves that Project Leo is the beginning, and we are already at least setting our sights or even some early steps of planning the next phases of Leo 2, 3, and so on, which will go for at least the next 10 years. So it's work in progress. We've made some pretty amazing, we've taken some pretty amazing steps that we are all very pleased with, but there is a lot of work to be done. And in the spirit of community energy, the way we are approaching it is that whatever we develop, we will eventually be sharing with community energy all over the place. Now, once again, if you are interested to look into more details into the different areas and aspects of LEO, please look it up at for our webinars in our website, lowcarbonhub.org. And that's me done. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Adriano. We're going to fire straight on, just so we have some time for Q&A at the end. So Damian is up next. Damian, if you're ready to share your screen.
So I am having a go. I'll try that little icon. Has that worked?
Yes, we can see you.
Great. So I'm Damian from Brighton Energy Co-op, and yeah, it says what we do on the tin, I guess, is community-owned renewable energy, like most people. Oh, that's jumped ahead without me intending to. And it's kind of fitting that we're following Adriano and the Low Carbon Hub, because 10 years ago we had mentoring paid for by Co-ops UK to learn about community energy, and did a tour of low carbon West Oxford at the time. And 10 years later, well, I'm still doing it, and so is Will Cottrell, my co-founder, and we've got 3.1 megawatts of rooftop solar installed to date. So we really only started getting going on installations in 2012, and in the last year have doubled our capacity. And actually, as Dan was saying earlier, hopefully we're going to do a few more installs before the end of September. But there's a question there as whether that's a hard stop date or whether, based on lockdown, it might be extended, but we can cover that in discussions later. So what I'm talking about today is the Pv and Eevee project. This was one of the first round of next generation projects, and our premise was basically to see what level of EV charging usage can provide additional income to make community solar viable post-feed-in tariff. So we've been ascertaining which of our arrays are at the optimum locations to attract EV users, and we're trialling a variety of communications and engagement strategies to encourage them to charge with us. We're planning to install EV charge points at a minimum of 6 locations where we or partner organisations have got PV arrays, and to measure the charging usage over the 2 years of the project. Who's going to benefit? The community energy sector is going to benefit from the research undertaken and the intelligence gathered, and the local communities is also going to benefit from subsidised electricity and improved air quality. So where are we doing this? We've identified a 17-site long list, which is basically our own sites, and filtered this down to 6 sites initially where we would put electric vehicle charging points. And this is basically where we've got solar arrays already. And these represent typical use cases for EV charging. And by use case, I mean a workplace or a leisure facility or somewhere where it's near a main trunk road and people might stop for an hour to recharge their vehicle before continuing their journey. So when is the big question we're all talking about at the moment, isn't it? We were aiming to install the first charge points by now. And obviously we've put that work on hold and planning to add more locations through the summer. We've been told by CSE that Power to Change is allowing a 3-month extension on the next generation project, which is sensible, and I guess it may be extended beyond more than 3 months. But given that we actually didn't get any kit in the ground, and even if we did have charge points in the ground, most of those locations are closed at the moment, so we wouldn't be gathering any intelligence. We're hoping to be able to install, as soon as possible. In fact, yesterday I put in the order for 10 twin charge points because I was alerted by the sales manager at Pod Point that the prices go up tomorrow. I probably shouldn't have said that actually, because he said it was confidential, so don't mention it to anybody. So why are we doing this? Basically, it's proving a premise that EV charging revenue can contribute to making community renewables viable again. And if you think about where is the most, and from DNOs, this is a massive challenge, the biggest potential growth in electricity usage, well, electric vehicles and electrification of transport is that area. So what current challenges have we got? So we're limiting to sites where we've got existing arrays, so where we've got PV or our partners do, and just through the nature of where we've chosen arrays so far, I guess high usage, reliable organisations, most of those car parks or parking is available just for workplaces or staff. One of them where we're planning to put an EV charge point is Bolney Wine Estate, where we've got an array on their wine production facilities, and they're quite near the A27, and it could be a nice location for people on a journey to come, 5-minute drive off the A27, and we wouldn't encourage them to sample wine, but there's a restaurant there and a shop to charge at the same time. And looking forward, we're talking to Portsmouth University actually about collaborations. We were talking to them yesterday. They've got a very innovative new head of their energy department. So potentially we might put a charge point there, which is be another opportunity for research alongside Brighton University. And really we're following models such as Pivot Power, who I know are involved with projects in Oxford, Innovate projects in Oxford, and GridServe, who seem to be very aggressively expanding across the country, of linking up renewables and charging hubs. And clearly we're not trying to compete, but finding the community energy niche that will be underserved by these big players. And the question was whether do we lease or own, and there was also a question around the guidance, the criteria for power to change, but we concluded and convinced power to change that purchasing to capex of the kit makes much more sense than leasing, because effectively the leasing models available to us would have just been paying interest to a finance company at 15% for 3 years and then still owning the kit. So why give away the interest payments we figured? And our offer to sites is an initial 3-year period, which actually mirrors the warranties from the charge point operators, based on a revenue share model. So it won't cost, for example, the University of Brighton or Maidstone Football Clubs is a place we're looking at, anything to have a charge point there, and we would basically do 50-50 split of the profits. And ownership of the kits, so the charge points, will remain with Brighton Energy, because the next generation funding is, as well as the dissemination of knowledge, it's about creating community benefits. So the assets have to stay with community organisation. Does that move forward? Yes. And this is an image from, you can see in the bottom right hand corner, Cenex, who did a piece of consultancy work for us, very useful consultancy that was included in the next gen budget. And they looked at business models, techno-economic modelling, which was a term that was new to me, but I understand it now, basically mixing technology and economic modelling. And if you look in these images, there are little square, they look like diamonds, yellow and black spots with a zigzag, and that's where they've suggested the charging point should go. And one of the learning points that I'll go on to is that it's obvious really that charging points you should site as close to appropriate level of electrical capacity as possible, and not have to dig up car parks, go across roads, drill into concrete, etc. Because basically you're going to double the cost of the installation. So Cenex suggested charge point locations next to buildings where there's electrical connection, and potentially running cables in soft ground, which just dig up with a spade, rather than drilling across concrete or tarmac. So there's some very practical logistical considerations that are obvious when you're told about them, but you may not have thought of in advance. So emerging lessons for the community energy practitioners. Well, as I just referred to, location is key for charge point siting, both in terms of digging up the ground and running cables, which can be quite expensive, but also appropriate electrical capacity, because electrical capacity in a particular building wasn't sized for having charge points connected to it. So you have to do a survey to see if what exists is sufficient to support the charging. And prices, this is still a bit Wild West in terms of a marketplace. You can see the energy companies snapping up a variety of charge point operators and suppliers. So the prices vary quite widely. We did a tender of 6 different operators, and those prices were quite variable. but there's also deals to be done, and particularly now, you know, there's not many people buying charge points. It's always worth trying to negotiate, see what you can get. And in terms of usage, it's worth modelling potential usage of the charge points at different locations to think about maximising return on investment, because you're committing to kit in the ground that could become stranded or not pay for itself. So thinking about actually who's going to use the charge points, at what price, and what other charging assets are in the area. So if you can find out from planning applications, etc., if a charging hub is going to be built, for example. And we've certainly been benchmarking other cities and communities. So Dundee is very innovative in EV charging. Cambridge also. Milton Keynes, which is, you know, it often trials new technologies due to nature and the grid layout of the city. And understanding factors where there is higher EV usage. At the University of Brighton Falmouth site, for example, we know through their own sustainable travel survey that they have 20 regular EV users, and we're modelling maybe a fifth, you know, 20% of those EV users would charge on any day at the location. And finally, investigating partnerships. So the sort of pivot power grid serve models. I saw an announcement a couple of days ago of a car parks that exist in sort of residential locations are looking at putting charging bays there across the whole of the southeast in London. So it reminds me of 20 years ago, the dot-com boom. There's lots of new models, some which will work, some which won't. A lot of press releases claiming things are going to happen. I think we just have to soldier on our own level and, you know, work out what's economically viable at community scale. As I mentioned, we're looking at partnership with the University of Portsmouth, and we're also learning from other community business models like Charge My Street and Electric Corby. Charge My Street basically are doing a community share offer to have community ownership of a whole range of community charge points in the Northwest, and I think that they're involved with an Innovate project as well. And that's me. Thank you very much.
Great, thanks very much, Damian. I realise we're running probably 10-15 minutes behind time, but I am quite keen to get a few questions in. So we've done our best to collate some of the questions from the chat along the side, as well as some that have been sent directly. So just to quickly go through those, there was one for me about the community power tariff in terms of its capacity. We currently buy from about 95 community-owned generation projects across the country. So I'll just start my video. Although why you'd want to see my face, I'm not sure. So we are, we're purchasing from around 95 community-owned generators across the country, which could supply up to about 25,000 domestic properties as it sits. So if you've got any questions about that, either contact me or Ryan. I'm happy to answer any further questions. We've had a few questions for Sarah around the FCA and the threat that some energy cooperatives are under at the moment. And I was wondering if you could, if you've got 2 minutes just to speak to that and how you've got around those issues.
Yeah, so we quite a lot of engagement with the FCA to get them comfortable with our model. I think a key issue is for it to not be an investment vehicle, to be a sort of genuine co-op where the members of the co-op are getting a benefit. And yeah, I think the key is for it to not be an investment vehicle. And so we've we've done things like we're limiting how much people can own to. The minimum is like £250 and the maximum is 120% of their electricity usage, or the equivalent watts that would deliver up to 120% of their usage. So you can't, you won't be able to invest £100,000 in a wind farm or a solar park and get huge savings off your bill. So we've structured it very much as you're becoming a member of a co-op to get clean, low-cost electricity, rather than it being yeah, and a sort of investment vehicle for people to make yeah, sort of fantastic returns from a sort of yeah, investment basis. So it's all about the electricity, and I think that's a key issue for.
Great, thank you very much. We've had a few questions about O&M and operational costs with scaling up community projects, if there are a lot of community generation projects under one organisation, and the billing elements and things. But Damian, I think directed at you for Brighton Energy Co-op, 3.5 megawatts, plus the scale up that you're looking at. How are you accounting for the operation and maintenance of those sites?
I'm just thinking how much we paid operation and maintenance last year was about, so for about 2 megawatts it was about £12,000, and that wasn't based on any scientific model. It was just how much person hours of site visits to do electrical checks and to do cleaning. So we anticipate about £20,000 perhaps. Now we're at sort of over 3 megawatts of assets. And also alongside that, we since the beginning have been setting aside, based on metrics that my colleague Will did, an equipment fund, like a sinking fund for replacement of inverters, and we know we're going to have to replace an inverter or two in the next year or so that are underperforming. So basically, yeah, I could work out the metrics of per kilowatt how much we spend on operations and maintenance and electrical checks, but also having a sinking fund so that you don't hit, your financial model isn't hit by a large amount of expenditure because kit is failing, which was always anticipated it would.
Great. We've had obviously a lot of questions. I think I'm going to wrap up there though. A lot of those questions are specifically about cost of installs and different prices that are being achieved around the country. So hopefully we can pick that up outside of this format. Ollie has asked me to mention that there should be a social impact poll at the end of this session. So please do look out for that. And I think now the plan is to break for lunch until 1:15, I believe.
Right. Tom, sorry, can I just mention one other thing, if you don't mind?
Sure.
40 people didn't allocate themselves to dropout rooms, to breakout rooms. And so you've been personally messaged those people. Please check your personal messages and just respond about your breakout rooms, please, so we can allocate you. Thanks. Sorry, carry on, Tom.
Brilliant. No, that's it from me. Everyone enjoy your lunch. I think we've run 5 minutes over, which considering the format is not too bad, hopefully. So looking forward to the afternoon. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much.